And we're back. This is Empower Hour on 89.3 FM WPFW. I am Deshauna Spencer, your host. I'm really excited to have my gracious giver here with me today, Dr. Pernessa Seal. She's the founder of Balm in Gilead. Welcome to WPFW.
Well, welcome. Thank you so much for having me today.
I'm glad that you're here. If you have any questions or comments, you can call 202-580-8893 or hit me up on Twitter using the hashtag EmpowerHour. So, Dr. Seal, first I want to get into the name of the organization. How did you come with this name?
Well, 28 years ago, believe it or not, I was working at Harlem Hospital and doing the devastation of HIV/AIDS. When churches and nobody, mothers, fathers, were not coming to the bedside of their loved ones who were dying. And this whole movement started by getting faith communities to address HIV. And the name took on the balm in Gilead because we want faith communities to be that balm in this land that is suffering. Today, we're not, our HIV is not our primary focus. We have supported the development of health ministries because when we look at health disparities in the African American community, you know, we believe that every black church serving black population should have a health ministry. So our role is not just HIV, but diabetes and Alzheimer's, and, you know, how do we build a capacity and how do we support our congregations in having the skills to address the health situations that are in their congregations and in their communities. So we want every church and every faith community to be a balm in this land of Gilead that we are suffering in.
You know, it's interesting. You were talking, initially about your role with HIV/AIDS. Yes, of course, nearly 30 years ago, churches wouldn't even talk about it. I mean, some churches won't talk about it now when it comes to HIV/AIDS. And I feel like it's so important, especially the fact that so many black women are affected by HIV, and the fact that you did it so early on. I mean, did you receive the backlash from it, or what was the type of response that you received being at the forefront of this, especially when it comes to the black church?
Well, believe it or not, in 89 when I started, the church was really hungry. There were really two types of responses, and the majority of them were just hungry to find a way to address this very volatile disease that brought up conversation that the church didn't talk about. The church didn't talk about homosexuality. The church didn't talk about sex. And here, HIV brought those subjects that they didn't talk about front and center. So when, I started out with this Harlem Week of Prayer for the healing of AIDS, which was, a cultural program, in public health terms. But that was what the Lord really gave me to do, the Harlem Week of Prayer for the healing of AIDS. And that program allowed faith communities, allowed pastors and faith leaders to find their voice on how they talked about HIV, how they talked about and supported, gay men in their congregation. I remember the great Dr. Wyatt T. Walker, who was the pastor of Canaan Baptist Church in New York at that time. He said in 89 he had already buried 70 men from his congregation.
Wow.
But the week of prayer provided him the opportunity to find a way to talk about it. Certainly I was not the first person to go into the church, but the people before me, they went with a condom and a banana, and the church couldn't get to it.
I would have wanted to be there to see that, scene.
But I came with a week of prayer for the healing of AIDS and education, and thank be to God, it worked. And today we're doing, we're carrying that mantelpiece right through now, talking about Healthy Churches 2020. It's HIV, it's all the ills that addresses us, and how do we bring our faith communities, those who are aggressive, those who are conservative, how do we bring everybody into this space where we have to talk about black health? How we must have a response to these devastating, alarming rates of health in our community.
Right. I think it's so important too and honestly, when it comes, you think about the Black church is really tapped into the communities. A lot of people who attend church regularly spend a lot of time at their churches. They know their pastors. They know, they create these, relationships and communities within the church. And it's really a great space, just like the civil rights movement, to talk about social justice issues. I think it's just as important for churches to be that space to talk about health issues.
Exactly, and health is a social justice issue.
Yes.
Violence is a public health issue. Clean water in Flint is a public health issue. Environmental health. I mean, public health issues it's a major injustice in our community. So, we are having our 3rd annual Healthy Churches Conference in Charlotte, and we want all of your listeners to, go to our website and see how to get involved, in this Healthy Churches 2020 movement, because I think about, back in the day, every church has a youth department, whether, many of our churches now are they are the aging population and don't have many youth, but every church has a youth department. And that's because at one point in time, making sure that our youth got to school, making sure that we knew how to read and write, it was important.
Right.
And so every church had a youth department. And I say today, every church needs to have a health ministry because the alarming rates of diabetes and obesity, Lord, when I say obesity, I have to say Lord Jesus, because that is my struggle. Food deserts. We need every church to have a health ministry, and our conference in November is where we want churches who have health ministries to come, churches who don't have health ministries to come and be a part of this movement on how we support each other and get skills so that when Sister Mary comes and say, I don't feel good, I'm taking all this medication, there's somebody there who knows where to go to get some resources for what's happening in the congregation.
Right. I think that's so important. I know that some churches in the D.C. area, a lot of big churches are here, so some churches do have the health ministries. They have nurses on staff, but typically it's like if someone like faints at church, it's not from like a spirit or anything. Like someone like literally like gets sick or something at church, they're there to assist them. And I feel like churches are starting to do more. The church that I attend sometimes here is Alpha Street, and they actually have like a cancer ministry. And their ministry is really great, really give people a lot of resources on cancer and different types of cancers. And it's not just for patients, but also caregivers, which your website also talks about a lot as well, because a lot of us in our community tend to be caregivers. So I really think it's important that churches offer those type of services. You're absolutely right.
Yes, yeah. Alpha Street, you all have been in the forefront on so many levels, over the years, HIV and now cancer, and we will be addressing all of those issues, and one of our major topics is oncology, the diagnosis, what is cancer, what is it, the diagnosis of it, the prevention of it. We have Dr. Barbara Hutchison, who is the president of the Black Cardiology Association, talking about the state of Black health and our heart. Why do we suffer so much from cardiovascular disease? And not just we're not going to talk just about prevention, and we're going to also talk about disease management, because oftentimes, once we get, a diagnosis of these diseases, we do a very bad job in managing them. Some people live for a long, long time with hypertension or a heart disease, but some of us don't because we don't manage our diagnosis well, or we're not familiar with the latest intervention. We're not familiar with the latest treatment. We may be getting the same intervention that they did 10 years ago. Right. And no one even shares with us the best, greatest intervention for your heart disease or for your diabetes. So we talk about all of that and how we bring all of this information back to our congregation.
I think that's so awesome too, because it makes me to think about the marriage of science and faith. I feel like a lot of times, at least in my church growing up, there are people who who get sick, and they went to the proper channels, so they got cancer, radiation, chemo. Like my dad, he had cancer. He is in remission, thankfully, and he had radiation, chemo. And I grew up in church, but I'm telling you, if my dad was like, I'm just going to pray about it, I'm like, sorry, bruh, but we're about to take you to the hospital. You about to get this radiation.
Right.
You about to get this chemo.
Right. And we still suffer from that. You know, I have folks in my family down south, south of the border, you know, in South Carolina. And when I see them, like I did last week, I was home, you know, you see the health challenges. You're looking at it, and all they will say is, "I'm not going to the doctor until Jesus tells me to go."
Right.
Well, and what do you do with it? You know, and I share the facts, and I share my own testimony of having to maybe address the same issue, but through a medical intervention. You know, but it's like, nope, we're gonna pray and we're gonna wait on Jesus. And it's like, how do you break through this? You know, and I know the frustration that, you know, most of us have. We have that in our families, and that's also a cause of the alarming rates. You know, so we have those discussions. You know, this our conference is mind, body, and spirit. We have a workshop for pastors only. This year be led by Bishop Horace Smith, who is a medical doctor, Apostolic Faith out of Chicago, Illinois. You know, because sometimes pastors have to talk to pastors, not only around their health, but also around how do you lead a sick congregation to health. You know, and so that's another one of the major workshops that we'll be providing there, pastors only workshop.
Wow, I think that's so awesome, because I feel like prayer is important, but so is having a medical doctor as well. Amen.
I mean, you have to pray for the doctor. You know.
So, too, I know I was looking on your site and looking at like the health ministries, and one of the things to me, I think churches probably aren't doing a really great job at is the kitchen ministry or the food ministry, because growing up, and even a lot of churches I go to here, well, Alfred Street don't really serve plates after church, but a lot of churches do that. They still serve those dinners after church, and typically it's stuff that tastes really good, but
fried chicken, baby, fried chicken, macaroni.
Greens with the you know
with
him
meat,
exactly.
Right. When I go through the buffet, I say, okay, is there meat in this? Can I? And it's usually I can't even eat anything from the buffet, you know, and all they have is sodas. You may have a bottle of water. So yes, the kitchen ministry is definitely something that we address, you know, at our conference. You know, how do we change, you know, the consciousness of the kitchen ministry, you know, because again, it goes back to leadership. You know, how do we change the consciousness of the kitchen ministry?
Right, because you know it says the body is your temple, but I feel like a lot of times we don't really sometimes see that, especially when it comes to food and our relationship with food, and seeing that what we put in our bodies really does affect so many other things. And I really feel like you're really addressing that with your organization. Another thing I really think is really important that you talk about, to me, which is a lot of things we don't talk about that much, is mental health. You focus on mental health as well. And in our communities, again, especially people who are in the church, it's something people just don't want to talk about, or just it's like it doesn't exist.
Yes, that's another one of those. I only talk to Jesus. I don't need a therapist. You know, and this year we are so just honored that, you know, our gospel legend, you know,
Richard Smallwood.
Yes. Richard
I was on your site, so I saw.
and we know Brother Richard Smallwood, and he's going to be with us to open up to share, you know, his plight all these years around depression, you know, depression in the black church. And I think we're just blessed that someone like Richard Smallwood, who has given us, you know, just extraordinary songs that we've held on to, you know what I mean? You know, we can just think about, you know, the center of my joy, and, you know, all of the songs that he's given us, and to think that he was suffering through depression, you know, and to have someone like him come out and say, I want to tell you my story, you know, and hopes and pray that it will help somebody, you know. So we are just excited that, you know, Richard Smallwood has said, yes, I'm going to come and share, you know, what I've been through, but also, you know, what the black church can do to help those who are sitting in these pews and at the organ and at the piano and in the choir who are depressed every summer. Every what do we have to do to address? How do we get a mental health counseling program at our churches? So we'll have several churches who already have counseling programs as a part of their ministry as a best practice, and hoping that they can share how others can go and do the same thing.
That's awesome. We do have a caller. If you want to say your name, where you're calling from, your question or comment.
From Washington, D.C., good afternoon, my sister.
Good afternoon.
I want to say to the wonderful doctor, thank you, thank you, thank you. You are among the very few who dare say anything about AIDS. And now, if you have created such consciousness and awareness, you have made a big difference. This is what I want to ask you. Just like AIDS, there is another force that's killing people in Africa. Tens and tens of thousands of people are being killed by dictators, and the Ethiopian churches here are not saying a word except very few. What do you say to the Ethiopian church to be like you and create awareness about the murder?
Thank you for your comments, sir. So I know you do some work, and I think it was in Tanzania, but I think your focus pretty much is on HIV/AIDS there. Correct, Dr. Seal?
Yes. And I was just in Ethiopia last summer this time. Yes, last summer this time. And I think, although I did not hear what specific disease he was talking about, whether it was HIV or whatever. But it's at some point in time we the African Americans have to continue to do work on this side of the pond as well as on the other side of the pond. But we also must engage and motivate our Ethiopian brothers to do the work at home. Because I've worked in 6 African countries, I could write a book on, and I love working on the continent, and I love bringing black people together wherever we are.
Right.
But I also know that my brothers and sisters on the African continent must be more empowered to begin to address these situations in their own culture, in their own way at home. It's because guess what? I don't care where we are. No one's coming to rescue us.
Right.
We have to come together to work and find our own creative ways to find our own solutions in our community. Because I've looked high and I've looked low. Nobody's coming to rescue us.
Right.
We must find ways to rescue ourselves. And I believe that the church is that institution that we have, that we've always had, that will help us in our rescuing of ourselves.
I totally agree. I think you're so right about that. I think there was a time like, who's going to come to give us resources? Like, no, we have all the resources we need in our communities already. We just need to use these resources and tap into those resources. You're so absolutely right. We have about maybe 2 minutes left. I really want to talk about some of the stuff you're doing around brain health, because it's something that you typically don't hear that much about at all when it comes to black health at all, or black disparity or health disparities among the black community. Talk a little bit about what your approach is to that.
Well, we are so happy and blessed and honored and all those adjectives that we are now the home of the National Brain Health Center for African Americans. And what that means is, we the African Americans, believe it or not, black women have the highest rate of Alzheimer's than any ethnic group. Women have the highest rate than men, but within or everybody, whether it's men, women, Hispanic, whoever, black women have more Alzheimer's than anybody else.
Wow, that's scary.
And we have to, and once again, we are new into this conversation. We are new, and how do we get ourselves into getting those available screenings to see if we are vulnerable for Alzheimer's. We now see younger women, people in their 30s and 40s, being diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And then there's caregiving. And in caregiving, we are the number one caregiver.
The sisters.
And oftentimes the caregivers are the ones who falling apart
Mm-hmm.
because we're so busy taking care of the person who is sick that we're not taking care of ourselves. So the National Brain Health Center, we are training not only people within the faith community. We have a partnership with the National Black Nurses Association. We're going around the country training nurses who are in the hospitals, in the clinics, nurses who are home-based care, around Alzheimer's. The Brain Health Center also deals with Alzheimer's, stroke, because it's all cognitive health.
Right.
It's those diseases that address our brain. Stroke is high on the list.
This is so great. We're out of time, but for people who want to learn more about you and where they can go to learn more about your conference coming up, quickly, if you can tell people where people can go online. Dr. Seal?
Healthy Churches 2020.org. Healthy Churches 2020.org. Please go to our website, and you can also register right there, healthychurches2020.org.
Thank you so much, Dr. Seal. It was so great having you on my show. Good luck with everything, and continue to fight the fight, because it's definitely important.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Bye-bye now.
Bye.